national guides, if you ask them how much does the foreigner spend, they don't have an answer for you. They're at the very bottom end of the supply chain.
Tim McGuire is the founder of TourOnePlanet, an online marketplace that connects travelers directly with locals. He's here to unpack how tourism actually works in Madagascar and whether that system can be fixed.
I had this question: how could vacations to Madagascar be so expensive, but local people working in tourism remain so poor? And I just encourage people to really.
Tim, what first brought you to Madagascar?
I had the opportunity to do a master's program at my university, Andrews University. I chose community and international development. I went through the program and then I had a summer abroad in Madagascar. And I didn't choose to go to Madagascar. It was a mandatory requirement at the time because the director of my program, of my degree, is originally from Madagascar. And before COVID, he would take his students there every year to study.
So you went there on a master's program, study abroad, and fell in love with it? Or how did that happen?
It all started with my professor, Joël. He, I can say, invested in me in a way that no one had ever done for me before. I was quite a lost young man. I didn't really know my place in this world. And at the end of the study tour, and between that and the start of my internship, I had some space. And so he actually offered to take me on his vacation with him. To some Malagasy people living here in Madagascar, that might not seem like a big deal, but I see it as a big deal because my professor is very, like, as we say here, gas. He's very proud of being Malagasy. He doesn't dance for anyone. And for him to take a young man from Maine, relatively uncultured, on his vacation with him at a time when he could just focus on being with his friends and family and everything like that, that actually changed my life, that someone would do something like that for me. And because of that, I got to see Madagascar not through my eyes as a foreigner, but through his eyes as a Malagasy person who loves his country. That kind of just was the spark that led to me wanting to be here. It wasn't easy to come back here. There was so many different trials and difficult times I kind of had to go through, but through all of those difficult times, my mind was always here. And I think that was really what helped me get through.
Amazing. So Madagascar has been in the news because of the Gen Z protests that we saw all over social media, and then the Prime Minister of Madagascar was overthrown. Tell us a little bit about what brought on these protests in Madagascar and what's the mood like there now?
Okay, so the situation here is Madagascar is one of the richest countries in the world when you talk about resources. We have precious minerals, sapphire, gold, oil, great fisheries, forestry, and not to mention, the greatest resource, which are the people. So having all of these things, you would think that the people here must live really good lives and are very happy and have everything they need. But that's just simply not the case. USAID had a statistic that I thought was just shocking, saying that Madagascar was the poorest non-conflict country in the world. The reality is, I think it's more than 70% of people live under $2 a day, or $2.05 a day. And so I think in the rise of Gen Z, a generation that's very internet savvy, and despite the challenges here in Madagascar, Madagascar actually has the fastest internet speeds in all of Africa. At some point, there was just enough was enough. As a Vazaha, as a foreigner, I was looking at the former president would publicly say that Malagasy people are, they're poor, but they're happy. They're happy to just eat rice every day. You don't need to feed them caviar. People are going to see that, and they did see it. And this kind of attitude was reinforced again and again. And at some point, people just are going to get tired of feeling taken advantage of. Because as I said, there's so many resources here, but the greatest resource are the people. The people are just so special here. And they weren't just going to wait for something to change. They were going to change it on their own. And so they started with this, give us electricity, give us water. And that was just a simple thing, because even in the capital, we have power cuts, water cuts all the time. And that's just the capital. Yeah. And so it was very simple, like a simple request.
What's the mood?
It's very peaceful. I would say that people are cautiously optimistic about what the future can hold, but there's certainly no civil war or anything like that I've kind of read about in the news. In fact, I've really never seen Malagasy people more kind of united and cautiously hopeful.
So we're going to talk about Tour One Planet that you set up in a little bit. But first, tell us, how do locals see tourism there? How is tourism set up? And kind of give us an overview of the tourism industry in Madagascar. When I see Madagascar on social media, as far as travel, I see lemurs, baobab trees, and like luxury lodges. But I don't really get a sense of the real Madagascar in terms of like having a cultural inspired time in Madagascar. So what is it like, tourism there?
No, you said it. That is how tourism is marketed in Madagascar. And because I want to work with the Office of National Tourism, the Confederation of Tourism, I will say this publicly. I think that's a mistake to market Madagascar like that. Because if we're going to try and compete with nations abroad in luxury, we're going to fail. What we have in Madagascar, no other country around the world does. And that's Malagasy culture. That's the Malagasy people. And they are the ones who deserve to be highlighted. They're the ones who deserve to be compensated. Like, that's the reason you come to Madagascar. As an American, why am I going to come halfway across the world just to do the same exact thing I can do back in Florida?
Yeah.
That makes no sense. Right. So, and as far as
Because they
kind
have
of
beach
the,
beach,
oh yeah, I
right?
mean, they have beautiful beaches. That's an attraction. Absolutely. And the baobabs and the lemurs, that's all attractive. But what really sets this place apart are the people. And unfortunately, the people just don't have the access to really determine their own outcomes of tourism, right? They are very disconnected. Even national guides who go to university, speak four languages, if you ask them how much does the foreigner spend for this vacation you're taking them on, they don't have an answer for you. They can't tell you because they're just so disconnected from, they're at the very bottom end of the supply chain. This leads to a lot of, exploitation within this tourism industry here because there's just so many different intermediaries who take. And by the time you actually get to the person providing the service and actually the person who has the most liability, they receive next to nothing. On average, it's around 5% that a national guide will get for the
Wow.
national tour that they take their guests on. You go on Google and you want to go to Madagascar, you might find a booking platform. Okay, you book on that booking platform. Typically, the person on that booking platform is an international, a multinational tour operator. So you
Sure.
go and you purchase from that tour operator. By the time that the money actually gets to the individual that is providing you the service, there's nothing left because all the money has been taken along the way. I've asked these national guides, I said, well, how much does the local agency pay you? You take that number and you kind of compare it to how much the typical cost of that trip would be, and you realize, wow, at best you're making 5% as a national guide who's gone to university and gone to school.
Is there data out there that says what percentage of that package leaks out?
I would say no. All of this research was really on my own. I started really digging in heavily in 2020, but then 2022 is when I was actively on the ground, um, you know, conducting different interviews and then comparing that against what I was reading online versus what I was, seeing in person. And I think that that is the primary objective of tourism, or should be, because if local people aren't benefiting in the way that they should from tourism, why does a country open up their borders anyways? There's no point in doing tourism if tourism doesn't help and even hurts local people.
So who's benefiting on the ground in Madagascar? Is it the luxury lodges, the multinationals mostly?
Yes, but I mean, even what really starts, yeah, more than 50% of the people come here and they purchase a package, right? So it's got
Okay.
their, they're here for 2 weeks or whatever. So when they purchase that package, right from the jump, at least 40% is out the window, right? And that doesn't never even enters Madagascar because that's a European company, an American company, Australian, Canadian, whatever, right? And so you have obviously leakage from your international flights. You can't really do anything about that. You have leakage from your purchase with your tour operator. I mean, that is something we need to change. And then there could be other intermediaries in between. And typically the hotels that you stay at end up being owned by foreigners as well. So by the time there's actually any money left over, it's very, very small. Tourism in Madagascar, it's just kind of recovering from COVID because it's a really expensive
Hmm.
destination to reach because it's so far. So there's really so much potential. I would say the beneficiaries of tourism right now would be international tour operators more than anything.
So is that the problem that you were trying to solve, that you were inspired to come and solve and set up TourOnePlanet? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
I was involved with the little startup program back in Orlando where my parents are living now. And they really hammered home problem discovery, like discovering the problem, who has the problem, and start with that. Because a lot of times we come in with a solution before we really understand the problem. So 5 years after my first visit in Madagascar, I finally came back in 2022, and I had this question of how could vacations to Madagascar be so expensive, but local people, even those working in tourism, remain so poor? Starting with that question, I was really able to dig into several reasons why the situation is the way it is. And that's what led me to then, kind of create a solution and really bootstrapped it. I mean, really bootstrapped it.
What are the main issues that define the problem that you found?
Primarily, there's no way to process online payments to Madagascar. You can have an account here in Madagascar and send money abroad, but you can't receive money, which is kind of wild. And so that means that the only way that someone could compensate you for a service is through a wire transfer or paying in cash. And neither of those options are very secure for either the customer or the provider. And so this poses a really big challenge. Of course, you have marketing and exposure. And in a little bit, I think there's been the history of colonialism in Madagascar, being colonized by the French, has kind of reinforced certain behaviors. As I said before, you come to Madagascar, to experience Malagasy culture, and reinforce that that is what's really valuable. But so many people sadly feel like they don't see the value in themselves. They don't see the value in their culture and how we, can appreciate that, because they've kind of been taught for so long that the more French you are, the more
No,
valuable you are, and it's not only the French, but throughout the
yes, correct.
world, we've
Yeah,
had this
totally.
kind of problem. And so
Yeah,
that part of that is changing people's mindset to say like, no, 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 because they've come to me and said, Tim, I don't have anything. I said, but let me ask you, you're Malagasy, right? Yes, of course. Okay, that's already a big piece. Now I know you have a house, so can you set up a little mat on the floor for someone to sleep? And when they wake up, you can teach them how to cook breakfast and show them around your city. Yeah, I think I can do that. Okay, voila, there we go. That's a cool
pretty
experience
much.
for a weekend. That's
Yeah.
it.
So that was your goal, was to set up TourOnePlanet to bring in more Malagasy into tourism and benefit from tourism. I mean, how do you go about doing that? You've got to be like really boots on the ground, right?
Yeah. Well, it's about you talked about tourism leakage. It's about closing the leaks and patching up the leaks and finding a way that the people who are already providing the services, how they are going to keep the most of the money. And to do that, it needs to be more direct, right? And so in
Mm,
traditional tourism, I would say that there's walls, right? There's the people traveling, and then there's the people who actually provide the services. And that wall is
sure.
there, so you can't make any connection. But what needs to happen is you need to break down the walls, fold them down to create a bridge so that these people can make those connections. And so that was the whole goal. And so it was about finding a way to process online payments where a local person didn't need all of these intermediaries before they could sell a service, but they could sell it directly to someone abroad. In
Wow.
Madagascar, there is no B2C happening. There's no B2C. It's always B2B. Like it's always the Malagasy
Wow.
provider selling themselves as cheap as possible to some kind of either local agency or foreign provider. And
Yeah.
what TourOnePlanet now has done is that we've opened up the sea so they can literally sell directly to foreigners from any continent around the world. And
On your
that's
website.
yeah, on our website. Yes, exactly. And it's a slow process, as you can imagine, because no amount of money can really like turn the switch on. It requires time and time and time just to continue putting one foot in front of the other. But in our initial data points that we've taken, especially for our local operators who are putting together packages, they're earning around 5 times more on our platform versus the traditional way, because it's a direct process. What's been really fulfilling is when we've gone to make their transfers so that they receive their compensation. I remember the first time we sold one of these big packages, the woman, she just laughed. She laughed when I told her how much I was sending her, and I said, like, you think it's funny? And then the next day
So
she
you
came
were
back to me
joking.
and said, yeah. Next day she came back and says, well, how much are you sending? And I told her again, and she's like, really? I thought yeah, I thought you were joking. I said, no. I said, we keep 15%, and the
Okay.
rest we transfer to you. And she was like, oh my gosh. At the time she was pregnant, so she said, wow, like my baby's gonna be good, like really good, you know. And the people who went with her team were so happy. It was a group from France, and that was really like for me. I was feeling very discouraged at that time. Having that positive feedback really like I was like, okay, we're going down the right path. Got to keep going. Got to keep going.
And so, how is I mean, you have found a way to make sure they get the money. So there's some way of transferring locally, like from Malagasy
Yeah, yeah.
to them.
So there's the use of mobile money here in Madagascar. Pretty
Okay.
much everyone has mobile money, so they don't even need a bank account. Anyone, even in the countryside, as long as they have the smallest smartphone, can access our platform and begin to provide services online. They have to go through our application process so we can verify that they're trustworthy and all of those kind of things. But once they
Oh,
do
okay.
yeah, because it's a brand, we can't have
Yeah,
someone
of
be
course.
lying and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Some of the established operators also, or really new folks that you have.
It's both. I would say it's about 50-50. There's some people who have been doing this for a while, and there's some people
Okay.
who are we call freelancers.
How many do you have now on your platform?
We have over 80 right now who are actively registered, but I would say we're around like 70 more who are kind of have applied or maybe have had an active account but are not active anymore. They're spaced out around the country, and I anticipate by the end of the year we'll probably get close to 100, and then next year it's very likely that it could double just because I've finally hired an assistant, and she's made a big difference. I can take people's contact, get familiarized with them, and
Right.
then she can kind of get them set up, and that really expedites the process a lot.
How do you establish trust as a foreigner? Like we just talked about how Madagascar is a long post-colonial history and
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
mentality and decided to build a tour company there. How have you managed to sort of build trust and let them know that you're not typical sort of foreigner? I'm sure there's a word for foreigner there.
Yeah, yeah, Vaza. I'm still a
Baza,
Vaza, but Vaza, Vazah. Yeah, Vaza. I hear this word every
CAH.
day. Even the people who
That's
know me
hilarious.
still come. Yeah. No, I think you already said it. You have to be here, and you have to consistently be here. I had a hard time to just get my first local vendor on the platform, let alone first five, right? But I just kept going. I had to start by just going to people's homes, staying in their home, having lunch with them, and maybe only one out of every five of those people actually signed up on the platform. Everyone on our platform is independent, so it's they don't work for me; they work for themselves. The
Yeah.
platform is a marketplace. It's fulfilling. It's weird, but there's something inside me that just says like this is where I need to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know why it's me, but I'm just really grateful for the opportunity I have. When they find out about my project, they will say, thank you so much for this, Tim. And I said, oh, don't say thank you to me. I want to be rich off of this thing, man. This is a business. I'm not trying to fool people or anything like that. I'm just doing business the way I think businesses should be run. Businesses were initially designed to solve problems, not to make billionaires, but to solve problems. And where NGOs and charities fail, that's why we need social businesses to really pick up that slack.
You actually remind me a lot of myself when I was living in the
Mm.
Caribbean and I started out in travel journalism. I wasn't coming in and leaving. I stayed for a long time. And so while my colleagues were flying all over the world, I was more of a slow traveler. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's because I really connect with people. And I think that living in a tourism dependent region, that is the Caribbean, so I really got to see the human impact of tourism when it's good and
Mm.
when it's not good. Even with that, sometimes I've asked myself, like, should I be the one doing this? Do I still have my Western perspective? Like I always check myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever had those questions early
It's a
on?
great, it's a great, yeah. Absolutely. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you're more Malagasy than me because I do certain things that maybe they're not comfortable doing, even if they are Malagasy." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. I am Vazaha. There's you can never change that. I am always going to be a white man from America. That's the reality. What I can tell you is that you, as you being a Malagasy person, you changed my life. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the inspiration. And I don't mean just here in Madagascar. I mean like here. Malagasy people, starting with my professor, changed my life. And so what I do here, because I don't speak Malagasy very well, and where words like fall short, I just do with my actions. So I hope that when I'm old and it's time for me to go in the fasan in the tomb, that people will be able to look back and see, wow, Tim really loved Madagascar because he was able to build this thing and it changed so many lives. I don't want people to think I was a hero because I'm not, but the heroes are the people who live here. I've just been, whether it's lucky or blessed, to be in a situation where I can actually do something. It's very rare that someone my age can have the type of runway and the type of cultural experiences early on that lead them to do something. And like I said, you can come with all the money in the world and try to tackle this problem, but it's not going to work. You need to take time. And most people either aren't willing or don't have that luxury.
This is a question that swirls around a lot in tourism is sort of, can a foreign owned company truly be decolonized and conscious? As a consumer, what are signs that you'd look for
Huh, that's a good question.
for a company that says it's giving back equally and that it's a conscious tourism oriented?
I don't like giving. I don't like the word giving back. Like probably if you're using that word, I will avoid you because giving back implies that you've already taken. That's weak sauce to me, really. I don't think I can say I look at any type of particular wording or anything like that. At least from my experience here in Madagascar, of course, I encounter different people along the way who are foreign owners of hotels or restaurants, and it's about having a conversation and just seeing where your heart is. And I can not only that, but I watch how the employees how they work. You can tell if someone enjoys their job or doesn't. And if they enjoy their job, it's likely because they're treated well. For me, I don't really like that.
Yeah.
The whole we talk sustainable tourism or giving back or like I don't like using any of those words. Like
Yeah.
just where's the money going? That's all I care about. Where is the money going? Who is the one who actually has the access, which is the money, to determine the outcomes of this place? It should be the locals. This NGO that was here that I got my internship from, they just finally left. They gave all their boats and everything over to the
Oh,
community. And this community, they locally manage all of their marine resources. The biodiversity and the fish stocks in this area have really increased so much so that so many other people want to move here. It's just so inspiring to see local people, not they're now at the point where they appreciate not only do they just follow the rules, but they appreciate the wildlife, they appreciate the beauty that's here because, they're not just like barely surviving. Like that's the problem is most people, especially in Madagascar, are just worried about where their next meal is coming from. That's
right.
all they can worry
Exactly.
about. That's literally, the situation. So it's inspiring to see what's happened here.
Tell us a little bit about some of the experiences that you've added to your platform, for example. If I go to Madagascar now, I have more choice through your
Okay.
platform. So, like, what are some of the
Yeah.
experiences you've added?
Well, I think the thing I'm most proud of is our homestays. So we have
Oh,
four main categories. We have, multi-day tours, single-day experiences, local accommodations, and private transportation. And under accommodations, one of the categories is homestay. And that was something really important to me because when I did my internship here in this village, I stayed in the village. And I think, the only one to do that. Of all the volunteers that came through this organization, voluntarily stayed in the village in a local's house. And I think that was the initial reason you talked about trust. People started to see, okay, like he's got white skin, but like, he's all right.
yeah.
I just thought that experience was so valuable. The food was so much better than it was at the hotel. And to just like wake up and do the things that everyone else is doing was so valuable. It's priceless. So we just here in this village just last week there was a French family that came here and stayed in one of the houses, and from everything I can see it was a very positive experience. And I mean, it's
I
just like
love
it's so cool that someone from France can book a house in a small little village in the southwest of Madagascar, and then go and
yeah.
stay in that house and enjoy it in a safe and secure way. Like, and they make, I mean, that's a lot of money to people here. I'm always just trying to figure out how we can do more, how we
How
can
much is that?
market it more, increase the value. Their homestay, I think, was $25 per day, like per person,
Yeah.
but that also, that's including your meals. And usually they, in this particular homestay, they'll include like an excursion, like the sand island that's just out there, or they'll take you snorkeling, something like that. So it's
I
really affordable.
personally love homestays. I've done homestays in the
Yeah.
Caribbean. Even in Dominican Republic, I did a homestay and I was in this village in the southwest. I ended up writing about it for like a brand. But when you pitch it to, leisure magazines and things like that, there's like homestays. I don't want to stay in somebody's home. And I'm like, you're missing the point. There's this perception, oh, well, I'm going to be uncomfortable.
I think it's just missing, like you said, just kind of missing the point. Like, we miss out on the experience. We miss out on the journey. There's a lot of experiences on our platform that are not comfortable experiences, but every person I've talked to, when they conclude that experience, they forget about the discomfort, and if they remember it, it's because they laugh about it. My little brother came last year, and we went on like, it's kind of like a canoe trip on the Tirabina River, and we stayed 2 nights, and we fried, man. we got so sunburned, and
Oh, wow.
it's like, there's no bathrooms, there's no, I mean, it's just like you are just out in the middle of nowhere. There's no roads that connect these villages, nothing. And I mean, it's hot and you're a little bit uncomfortable, but when we talk about it now, we're like, man, that was the best trip we ever took, because we shared this moment together, and us with our guides, the people who we were with. It's about the experience, it's about the journey, and that's really what's so valuable. If you want to just go and stay in an all-inclusive resort, stay in Florida. Like, we have a lot of them there. Like, why are you going to come here and do that? Really experience the culture, really experience the people. That's what's so valuable.
There are a lot of Americans who are leaving the United States and
I don't blame them.
moving abroad. There are questions about, I want to go and do something that will benefit the locals. Maybe they're thinking of business ideas. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but I think that you kind of have to pause before you even think you're providing
Yeah,
solutions without even having lived somewhere for quite a while.
I
That's
agree. My mindset is this: if I, as a Vaza, as a foreigner, if I am not here in Madagascar providing something new, providing something of value, not only being neutral, but like being a big positive, I shouldn't be here. I should be in the United States. Like, if you come here and you want to start a restaurant, but like there's already a lot of locals who own restaurants that really doing good. For
yeah.
me, it's like, if you want to go to a country, make sure the people who are helping you get paid. Make sure you're not going there and trying to negotiate every nickel and dime. Make sure they get
Oh,
paid. Bring your Because that's what is actually valuable, at least in the beginning. It's the money that you're bringing into the country. Make sure that the local people are the ones receiving the money, and make sure you're not being stingy. You'd pay a lot more in the U.S. So, are you saying that the people providing you the services here in this country are worth less than the people in America? Like, I don't think so. I would argue, as a foreigner, if you're just neutral, that's already negative. Actually, you need to be a gross positive. Like, your presence needs to be a gross positive. There's times I get a little bit down on myself. Man, this is not working the way I wanted it to work. There's not enough people getting bookings. Then, if you ask the people, just today, they made a speech. I didn't have to say anything, but they talked about me, like, in front of this whole village here, because I do these videos, and when people ask me my favorite destination in the world, I always say this place. I don't think I deserve that kind of appreciation, but somehow the people still appreciate me, and that's very humbling. It doesn't pump me up. It actually, like, humbles me, because
Yeah.
I don't feel like I deserve it, but somehow
So
they treat me the way they do, and it's just, it's really amazing.
we both agree that tourism should primarily benefit people of the place. What are some of the challenges that you face in setting up Tour One Planet, even now?
Initially, it was just the lack of awareness on both sides, with the individuals here not knowing how much they were getting exploited, and therefore not really seeing the value of the proposition I was proposing. And at the same time, people who just go on vacation so mindlessly, they don't really think about where their money actually goes. Part of the challenge is just, I mean, yes, I am a white male from America, so there's a lot of privileges there, but I'm also young. I also present myself as kind of people might say a jock or something like that. And so maybe sometimes people might not take me seriously when I'm doing things, in particular from the institutional level. But just last week, I had the first time a director of one of the regions here of tourism, the East Coast, and she saw that I was there and she said, I want you to do all of these different things. So she set me up to be able to take videos and pictures of all the different sites. At the same time, I got to
Great.
meet a lot of potential local vendors. I wasn't asking for money or support in any other way, but just connect me with the people who I can talk to. And she was the first person to do that. And like I said, it just takes
Wow.
time to build the recognition, build the trust.
It also takes like that one person who kind of gets it, even in
Yeah,
tourism.
yeah, absolutely. And I can say I've learned how to describe it better. I've learned how to speak, even if I'm not speaking Malagasy very
Sure.
well.
That's the main language, right? Even though it's
I
still
like it.
French is
Yeah, I know.
business.
Yeah, I would say only 10% of Malagasy people speak French fluently. Yeah, it's not. In
Hey,
the
I know
capital,
that.
you will see it. In the north, you will see it. There's French kind of that's now been infused into the modern Malagasy. When they find out I'm in Madagascar, they say, "Oh, how's your French?" I'm
Yeah,
like we don't speak French
right.
here.
And the culture there is explained to us a little bit. Like they're kind of a really interesting mix, right?
There's actually more written and recorded history about Madagascar than there is about the United States. Some would argue Marco Polo was the first to discover Madagascar, but I think it was, and I'm forgetting his name, which is bad, but there was an Arab explorer before him. Marco Polo described Madagascar when he first landed as having elephants large enough to pick up elephants off the ground. It goes back like a really long way. And there's a great infusion of, people from the areas of Indonesia. People will say that they're the first people to come to Madagascar. Although, if you go into those like islands in Indonesia, they will tell you that they're descendants of Madagascar. There was a lot of Arabs who came down in the north, and of course there was Africans who came into the west. And since then, people have really mixed up. So there's uh, 18 official tribes in Madagascar, and within a lot of those tribes, there's different kind of family, subgroupings as well. Betsim Sadak is really a tribe, you might say, but it's not really a tribe because there's many tribes that make up Betsim Sadak. It's an ethnic group. So we could say there's 18 ethnic groups in
Yeah.
Madagascar officially. And when people ask to describe Malagasy culture, that's a little bit difficult because it changes, wherever you go and whoever you're with. If I had to say like one thing to describe Malagasy people is just like humor. Situations are so dark and difficult here,
Yeah.
but they find a way to make a joke. Like I shouldn't be laughing right now because this situation is not funny, but they'll post something on Facebook that's hilarious, and you just can't help but chuckle a little bit.
It's a form of self-preservation and
Yeah,
survival.
absolutely, absolutely. Resilience is a really interesting thing because resilience leads to what I call, the academic term is FDI, foreign direct investment. But the better, more understandable phrase would be poverty investment. We were talking about, people, expats or companies who come abroad,
Yeah.
they invest in poverty here because they like that people are poor because they can manipulate them. They can get them to work in their sisal factories or or
Uh-huh.
be out fishing or work on their roads because they can pay them next to nothing. But the interesting thing though is you can look at it and say, okay, the people are so poor and I can make a lot of money off of them, off of their backs. Or you can say, wow, these people are so poor and yet they still find a way to progress. They still find a way to do incredible things. They still find a way, even if they're just using rice sacks to sail up and down the Malagasy coastline. So what could they do if they just had a little bit more? What could they teach us in the Western world that we don't already know because they just had a little bit more? Because there's a lot you can learn from Madagascar. There is so much you can learn from Malagasy people. And if they just had a little bit more access, primarily, man, it could really change a lot of
That's
things.
not how the post-colonial world works, though. Unfortunately, you're
Well,
right.
I agree it doesn't work like that, so it's time to fix it. That's how I look at
Exactly.
it. And
Yeah, totally.
if it's not going to be me, then who is it going to be? And if I'm not going to do it now, when is it going to happen? Let's not wait for some politician. Let's not wait for some charity. Let's do what we can do with what we have in front of us. And the more privileged you are, the more that you've been given, the more that's expected from you. That's the reality. Now that I have this privilege, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to sit and feel guilty or sit there and take advantage of everyone else who's less privileged? Or am I going to use it to mean that we can all be on the same platform, on the same playing field? That's just how
100%.
I look at it.
What's next for you then and for tourism there, do you think?
Well, I'm hoping next year is a really big step. I think we'll I'm hoping to have a full year of TourOnePlanet.com being optimized, having a proper user experience. I would love to double what we've done this year. If we hit certain numbers, then I'm going to start looking into other markets where I would like to license our brand and our technology, our structure, our system to be able to apply in other places. But Madagascar is my home.
Fill in the blanks. Madagascar has taught me that.
That I matter. I mean, I just encourage people to really be a little bit more mindful of where your money is going. And whoever has the money has the access. And the person who should have the access is the local people. Because if we're visiting their country, they should be able to determine what are the outcomes of our visit. But if you do tourism correctly, and right now it's not being done correctly, but if you do it correctly, there's not one that I'd be more excited about than tourism.
Do locals feel that way though?
I
Are they
think so,
starting?
but you have to understand that, and I think you do, is when you don't have your fundamental human rights, the bare necessities in life, you can't really think about this. So that's when I say I'm privileged because I have everything I need. My life in Madagascar is great. So I can think on these higher level things and I can work in a way and be mindful of certain things that most people can't be mindful about because they don't have the time to think about that. And so while they're working, trying to survive, I'm trying to create a system in which they can thrive one day and gagne, hopefully.
If you enjoyed this episode, stay tuned for future Tourism Lens conversations. Hit the subscribe button, become a member. It directly supports my independent reporting and helps my channel grow.